Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Mystery Science Theater 3000, episode 1108, The Loves of Hercules, from 1960. There's a lot of talk in the MST3K fanbase of deep hurting, which is when a movie is so bad it's painful to get through, I guess for a long time I kind of went, yeah, but I can sit through anything. I watch so many movies. I review movies online. Like, I see so many bad things. I don't even know, deep hurting, that's for like novices who don't watch tons of movies like me. And then I saw this, and this was probably the one that gave me the most deep hurting out of any episode of the new season, because this is a really bad movie. It's probably the worst movie that they riff. It's also maybe my least favorite episode. There's no moments in this whole season, I have to say, that don't make me laugh, that don't make me want to watch more. This is probably a weaker episode, because I don't feel like they really got the hang of riffing it. Even Jonah on the Waverly podcast mentions that he hates this movie so much, and I can tell it's just a hard movie to get around. It didn't feel like they really got into it until towards the end of The Loves of Hercules, when they really started doing the voice of Hercules, like he was like this dumb guy and stuff. That was really funny. It almost gave it more of an identity, made it was a lot funnier, and especially like the end part where they're all singing and stuff was absolutely hilarious. And this episode will definitely have highlights, particularly the long hyped appearance of M. Waverly, as we saw him on the video from before this episode aired, assuming he'd have more appearances, and clearly we saw him killed off, or at least to my knowledge not brought back since this episode, and had just 30 seconds and then was destroyed, which is funny to like hype up a character and just like randomly kill them off. I think is actually pretty hilarious. And the host segments were all on point during this whole thing. There's not one host segment I didn't like, especially the fact that they watch Wings. Part of me thought, are the bad movies warping their sense of taste? Has their sense of taste come to a point where they actually think Wings is good, or is, I mean, that's the joke, but is the joke that it started to deteriorate their minds? I don't know. And that's why they like Wings. I was stuck on a plane once, and we were just like circling, waiting to land, and they ran out of things to show us. This is before they had like on-demand stuff, and we had to watch Wings, which I thought was punishing. And I was like, you're an airplane and you're playing Wings? A little too on the nose, guys. Ew. And this wasn't like in the 90s when that would make sense. It was like in 2007? Why did they have wings? Anyway, this episode shows that this cast and this version of Mystery Science Theater is almost able to get through anything. And a movie this bad, it's very riffable, but it's not as funny. I didn't laugh out loud as much until like the very end joke. I'm laughing hysterically. The Russ Myers Ferdinand the Bull is very funny riff that I think everyone, anytime I read anything about this episode, everyone mentions that riff. It has a good writing staff on this one. Paul Chaplin, Joel, Jonah and Barron, and all those guys are all writing on it. Felicia Day. Patton Oswalt I don't think really ever wrote for the movies, which I find I think that should happen. I don't know if that happens later in the season. I do find this one deep hurting because I've watched enough Mystery Science Theaters where there's some that I love and I laugh throughout, and I almost don't have a good time with the B movie. And this one, I almost felt like this movie was so bad it couldn't be stopped or helped by Mystery Science Theater. And I don't necessarily think the jokes were good enough to get me through that. It was a pretty bad movie. Jane Mansfield is pretty bad. I mean, she's gorgeous to a certain degree, but I don't think this is like the movie you're gonna see to fall in love with Jane Mansfield and her husband Mickey Hargitay, who are of course the parents that begat Mariska Hargitay. Or maybe she's already born at this point, or I know Jane Mansfield was pregnant with somebody. I mean, I listened to the You Must Remember This podcast, which goes over kind of Jane Mansfield and her husband Mickey Hargitay and how she got him hired this job and all that stuff, which is interesting. And if you want to know more, listen to the You Must Remember This podcast about Jane Mansfield. But this was actually a movie that was so bad it didn't even get released in America. It was actually a hit in Italy, and the only I keep saying, and then it was played in 1966 as a movie of the week on TV, so I'm not sure if it like just foregoed getting released in America, or that's all the info we know. I've talked to people who've had a hard time finding out exact release dates and when things are released in the 80s, so the early 60s I think is probably even worse. So I would believe that this movie is bad enough that it didn't actually get a theatrical release in America. It's like pretty horrendously awful. The bull sequence, apparently that bull had been given tranquilizers so Mickey Hargitay could take him down, and he was like very uncharismatic as Hercules. In fact, the title doesn't make sense, although in America it was called Hercules vs. the Hydra. You might talk to someone who's seen Hercules vs. the Hydra and doesn't realize they've seen this. And I don't know if either title is good, considering that he only romances, I mean, it's like 3 ladies, that's plural, so that makes sense, I guess. I do like a lot of things about this, the throwing things at people court. I like the idea of Servo and Crow debating something. That seems to be something that happened earlier. What was it in? I think it was in The Beast from Hollow Mountain. Clearly it started earlier in the season. I like that skit. I think it's a pretty good skit, and it'd be cool if it's ongoing past that. And M. Waverly's actually pretty funny. He's like a Borscht Belt comedian robot. I do think it's funny that they intentionally like hype something up that they knew they weren't going to use, which I think is fairly humorous. I mean, he was on the stickers I got from the Revival League thing, which is, I have those with me. See? M. Waverly's there with everybody else, but should he be? I mean, it's like, was that Towley from South Park? Is this Mystery Science Theater's version of Towley to have another bot to make merchandise off of? Will I buy an M. Waverly shirt? Possibly. I actually don't love M. Waverly. I like that Crow and Servo are not putting up with it. I think this is like the 5th Hercules episode. There was 502, which was Hercules, 410, Hercules against the Moon Men, 412, Hercules and the Captive Women, 408, Hercules Unchained. Jesus, they did a lot of them in season 4. And this is the first Hercules movie they've really done. Mike didn't do any Hercules movies. This is the first Hercules movie they've done since Joel, and the first one since the Comedy Central era as well. And I don't know if it was a film franchise that, I don't know anyone who's like, oh man, the Hercules movies, like nobody gives a shit about those. And I feel like the Mystery Science Theater episodes about Hercules, other than 502, which I remember being pretty funny. Unchained I have good memories about, but the other two I've seen, but I don't remember very well. When I saw Hercules, I wasn't excited. I kind of feel like it's something, clearly there's a ton of different versions, this and Tarzan, and a lot of them are bad, but I kind of am like done with Hercules. Like, please stop with the Hercules. And the deep hurting I got from this gave me enough that I do not want them to go back to it. Hercules episodes are kind of like, sure, it makes sense to make fun of Hercules movies. They were a staple of kind of B-movie TV at the time, which is kind of where Mystery Science Theater comes from, so it sort of makes sense. But I don't think I particularly like any of them that much, and I don't think this episode really changed my mind. Each one I go in hoping it'll be funnier, and I don't love those as much. Kind of part of Mystery Science Theater I often forget about, and when I was watching I was like, oh right, they've done a couple of Hercules. I forgot about that. This is probably my least favorite, although there are a few highlights in it. Like, I like all the Crow leaving. Crow did a lot of moving around and Hercules flicking him and Servo crashing was funny. Absolutely, I think everyone agrees the singing at the end is like almost like fall on the floor hilarious, just how long it lasts, and you're like, this is so bizarre and weird. I like that kind of them bringing their own sort of humor to this stuff. I think that kind of makes this version of the show work as well as it does, as much as it worked when Mike was the host or Joel was the host. You get the personality of the host and you get the personality of everyone on the writing staff, and I think they've done a good job of that, and that end joke really highlights that. It really came together at the end, and getting to the end, like, I love the parts where they're doing Nikki Hargitay's voices. It's like dumb Hercules. That was really funny, and if they had that throughout, I think this would be a lot higher for me, but it's probably one of my least favorite. I probably like it. Time Travelers was probably my least favorite. I know people really don't like Reptilicus. The Loves of Hercules is something that I just was not really into this episode as much as I should, although it still had great moments that I'm still going to talk about, specifically like things like M. Waverly, and then things like the singing thing at the end I will probably not soon forget. But other than that, this was kind of my least favorite episode, and one that didn't entirely work for the cast. If I were to guess, like, if I hadn't known that they do each riffing is in order of how they actually riff them, so you supposedly see them get better, I would have thought that this was maybe one of the first ones, because it felt like they didn't quite get the hang of it, and with a movie this bad, it was probably hard to get the hang of it. I think that Hercules bit at the end was really funny, and there were funny parts. I didn't like, I wasn't like asleep or something, but it just wasn't as funny as I think the potential of this cast and the previous episodes of this season have been. This is probably the one that if I was going to rewatch all of them, this is probably one I would not probably rewatch again, even though it does have a lot of shining moments. Is probably my least favorite, which might say more about how good this new season and incarnation has been. That one that I'm probably not going to watch again still has moments I'm still thinking about, and now when I say that, I'm like, yeah, but I'd like to watch M. Waverly. Yeah, but I'd like to hear that laughing thing at the end. Yeah, but I like that Russ Meyer's Ferdinand the Bull joke. So it shows like how good this is, that an episode that I think is the worst still brings out things that I think show how funny and unique this version of the show is. So if you have seen Mystery Science Theater 3000, episode 1108, The Loves of Hercules, and you would like to talk about it, then comment below and subscribe if you would like to.